What is a flood? It is a natural event or occurrence where a piece of land, or area, that is usually dry land, suddenly gets submerged underwater. Some floods can occur suddenly and recede quickly. Others take days or even months to build and discharge. What's more, floods can occur any time of the year, depending on weather conditions and/or the particular cause. Floodwaters can also cause contamination of the affected land by releasing raw sewage and dangerous chemicals, that previously stored, into the water. What's more, large-scale floods can cripple farmlands, preventing their use for growing and food production. Because most standard homeowners insurance doesn't cover flooding, it's important to have protection from the floods associated with hurricanes, tropical storms, heavy rains and other conditions that impact the U.S. Contact a local insurance agent for information on the National Flood Insurance Program. Types of floods. Depending on where and how they occur, floods are categorized into several different types. River flooding occurs when water levels rise over the top of riverbanks due to excessive rainfall over an extended period of time. River flooding can also be caused by the melting of heavy snow, as well as ice jams that impede the natural flow of river waters. Storm surge, produced when high winds from hurricanes and other storms push water onshore, is the leading cause of coastal flooding and often the greatest threat associated with a tropical storm. In the worst cases of these types of floods, water overwhelms low-lying land and often causes devastating loss of life and property. Surface flooding is a type of flooding that results, usually from intense rain oversaturating mostly flat land. This type of flooding occurs in one of two ways. The first way is that urban drainage systems become overwhelmed, causing water to flow out into streets and nearby dwellings. The second way occurs when moderate and/or heavy rains fall and eventually run off from nearby hillsides. The surrounding flatlands are unable to absorb the water, causing them to become flooded. Surface flooding is sometimes known as ponding. A flash flood is caused by heavy or excessive rainfall in a short period of time, 6 hours or less. Flash floods are usually characterized by raging torrents after heavy rains that rip through riverbeds, urban streets, or mountain canyons, sweeping everything before them. They can occur within minutes or a few hours of excessive rainfall. They can also occur even if no rain has fallen, for instance after a levee or dam has failed, or after a sudden release of water caused by the unblocking a debris or ice jam. Areas damaged by wildfires are particularly susceptible to flash floods and debris flows during rainstorms. Rainfall that is normally absorbed by vegetation can run off almost instantly, causing creeks and drainage areas to flood much faster, and with higher amounts of water than normal. How to prepare for a flood. When conditions leading to the increased likelihood of flooding begin to become evident, the National Weather Service will issue either a flood watch, or a flash flood watch. When this occurs, those living in the watch area should become aware of the possibility of flooding. During a flood watch, those who might be affected keep local radio and/or televisions tuned to local channels to receive the latest weather updates and emergency instructions. Monitor channels on any available weather radio. Be aware where to go should the need to evacuate becomes necessary. In low-lying areas, seeking higher ground should be the first option, especially in cases of flash floods. Ensure vehicles are filled with fuel. In the event that evacuation becomes necessary, put together an emergency needs kit. Such a kit should include a flashlight, extra batteries, cash, a watertight container for important documents and/or papers, such as insurance papers, medical records, etc., an adequate amount of bottled, drinking water, toiletries, and first aid supplies. This kit may come in handy should there be a loss of electrical power, or if an evacuation becomes necessary. Consider bringing in outdoor furniture, and moving important indoor items to the highest possible floor. If a flood threat becomes more likely, do so. This will help protect them from flood damage. Consider disconnecting electrical appliances during the most evident flood threats. Warning: do not attempt this standing in water. Electrocution could result. If necessary, turn off gas and electricity supplies at the main switch or valve. This helps prevent fires and explosions. In flood-prone regions such as known floodplains and low-lying areas, homeowners should consider purchasing a potable water pump for less severe flooding. Identify designated shelters or other possible places to evacuate to, should the need arise. Also, family members should identify safe places to meet, should they become separated. When conditions indicate that an actual flood is either imminent or is occurring, the National Weather Service will issue either a flood warning, or a flash flood warning. When this occurs, those living in the warning area should begin to take action. If directed by authorities to do so, evacuate as quickly as possible. Move immediately to higher ground or stay on there until it is safe to return to homes. In many cases, local authorities will have established facilities where evacuees can take shelter during flood emergencies. Just 6 inches, 15 centimeters, of moving water can knock an adult off their feet, and 2 feet, 60 centimeters, of water can sweep vehicles away. And once a vehicle is floating, the floodwater will render steering useless. A floating vehicle can easily tip on its side, trapping occupants. Follow recommended routes when evacuating. Be alert for washed-out roads, earth slides, and downed trees or power lines. Be especially cautious at night, when it is harder to recognize flood dangers. If water rises around your car, leave the vehicle immediately. Climb to higher ground as quickly as possible. If the vehicle stalls, abandon it. During a flood, listen to local radio and television stations, or a weather radio, for possible flood warnings and reports of flooding in progress or other critical information from the National Weather Service or local authorities. Be prepared to evacuate at a moment's notice. Keep away from floodwaters, as they create several hazards. Avoid traveling through flowing streams of floodwaters where the water's height is at least ankle high. Choose another path of travel instead. It only takes 6 inches of swiftly moving water to sweep an adult off their feet. If one should find themselves driving on a flooded road with rising waters, abandon the vehicle as quickly as possible, as most flood deaths take place in automobiles trapped by suddenly rising flood water, and move to higher and/or dry ground. Most cars can be swept away by less than 2 feet, 60 centimeters, of moving water. In addition to avoiding traveling in floodwaters, it is equally as important to keep out of floodwaters. Quite often, floods can overwhelm local sewage systems as well as cause seeping of underground septic waste containers. This can result in the release of harmful biological contaminants being released into the water. Direct contacts with such contaminants can cause any number of potential illnesses and infections. For this reason, people, and particularly children, should stay out and away from floodwaters. In some areas, dangerous wildlife might be released into floodwaters. This is another reason to avoid contact with floodwaters. Finally, avoid camping or parking along streams, rivers, and creeks during heavy rainfall. These areas can flood quickly and with little warning. Flood recovery tips. Before entering any home or dwelling, Be on the lookout for and or dangling loose power lines, damaged gas lines, foundation cracks or other damage. Stay out of any water in contact with dangling power lines. Approach the entrance to any previously submerged dwelling carefully, as parts of a building could collapse due to water damage. Watch out for wild animals, especially poisonous snakes that may have come into your home with the flood water. Immediately leave any area if the smell of propane or gasoline is evident. Contact the local fire department of gas utility and inform them of this problem. Check with local authorities for assistance with disposal or potentially hazardous materials. Chemicals such as cleaning products, paint, batteries, contaminated fuel and damaged fuel containers are hazardous. During cleanup, wear protective clothing, including rubber gloves and rubber boots. Discard any food items that have come in contact with floodwater, including canned goods, water bottles, plastic utensils and baby bottle nipples. When in doubt, throw it out. Contact any local or state public health department to get information on known contaminated water supplies. It may be necessary to boil or treat water before use. Do not use water that could be contaminated to wash dishes, brush teeth, prepare food, wash hands, or drink. Take photos of any damage, and inventory property for insurance purposes. Though floods cannot be fully prevented, becoming a victim of these natural disasters can be prevented by applying both common sense and following basic safety tips.